Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to have you here at Fire Station number 3. And it's a pleasure for me to get to introduce our fire chief to you. For those of you who haven't met Ulie, you must be very new to Rotary or very new to Bloomington, because I'm pretty sure the city was established around him. Ulie's history with our department goes back to the late 1970s. And he's Bloomington lifer for the most part, right? And a valued member of our executive team. Ulie has done an amazing job leading this department through a pretty ambitious transition that's still in process. So maybe I shouldn't say amazing until we get all the way through it. But Bloomington was the largest, what we call a paid-on-call fire department, and some of you may remember the term volunteer fire department, right? They stopped being volunteers quite a few years ago, right? But having a department that relied entirely on people who were willing to just drop everything and get called out at all times of the day is a really wonderful thing for a community. And as communities change and people become more mobile, that sort of service model is really hard to maintain for any community. And then you think about a community of this size and this complexity, the fact that we were able to maintain a paid-on-call fire department up until just a couple of years ago is really something special, and it takes a special leader to manage in that kind of environment. For a number of reasons I'm sure that Ulie will walk through, we asked the city council to look into the future and think of a different service model. And so we have started transitioning to what we call a hybrid department with full-time firefighters and still having paid-on-call firefighters. And one of the things that happens when you have full-time firefighters is you have to have space for them to live, because usually they're working 24-hour shifts. None of our stations had sleeping accommodations. And we had buildings that frankly were built in the 60s and early 70s, and the technological advancements in our apparatus and our equipment is such that those buildings had largely been outgrown by the equipment that we put in them to serve the community. So what Ulie has done is really provide a lot of really great information and a lot of confidence to the council that the direction we're heading in the future is the right direction for our community, and I'm really excited that he's going to share that with all of you today. So, Chief Ulie Seal.
Thank you. So, maybe a little history is in order. So the fire department was actually started in 1947. And it was started as a result of a very large fire that occurred on 95th and Lyndale. There used to be an oil refinery or a depot there. They had a large fire there. And the township at the time had forgotten to pay their fire dues to the city of Minneapolis. So since they hadn't paid their dues, Minneapolis came to the Richfield-Bloomington border and said, we ain't coming any farther. So, and that's not unusual in the world, by the way, even in today's world, it's not unusual. And so the township naturally was a little piqued by that, so they decided, along with some of the citizens, to start their own fire department. The first piece of property that was on 95th and Garfield was our original fire station, and that was actually basically given to the city by some of the charter members of the fire department for $1. So they built the first fire station there, and from then we just kind of grew with the city. So one station, then two, then three. We ended up with 6 stations eventually. The original plan had 8. We've stuck with 6 so far. The call load when I got on the department in 1976 was somewhere around 700 or 800 calls a year. Last year we did just shy of 8,000. However, the difference in the city between 1976 and now is considerable, right? There's been a lot of changes in the city. And as Jamie pointed out, our stations were built back in those 60s and 70s. In fact, Station 3, the station that this building replaced, was built in the relatively early 60s, and that got built relatively quickly after the fireworks explosion at the Met Stadium, because the closest fire station came from 95th and Lyndale. So, so as the city grows, and had grown, the department grew with it. We were able to keep up with volunteers for a period of time, and then what we call paid on call, and now which are part-time. All of our part-time people actually work shifts. They're assigned and come in and work hours at one of the stations that we staff. And our goal is to continue building this hybrid model until we can provide 24-hour, 365-day service out of all 6 stations. Right now you're getting that pretty much out of 4 stations. Several things happened to influence that. There was a period of time where we had some economic downturns, and so I've been here long enough so that I can tell you about several economic downturns that affected our ability to staff. We knew we were struggling staffing pre-COVID, and when COVID hit, it kind of accelerated some of the decline. Both the people being interested in doing this kind of work, because we went and still do go see a lot of sick people. And that's not as attractive to people as maybe going out and squirting water at a fire, although that's not very attractive to people on most Januaries. This January hasn't been too bad, but most Januaries, most people don't like that. So this long journey to where we're at today has been, as Jamie said, built around not only the growth of the city, but the growth of the need of our customers, right? Which is everybody that lives and works and visits the city. So with that, we started hiring full-time people basically last April. We hired 18 people as part of a SAFER grant, and SAFER is a grant that's been granted by the federal government, and it stands for Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. And we also hired 3 more as part of our budget process. So we're hiring 7 more, and we're going to end up with 30 full-time folks, hopefully by about mid-April, and continue to build that number. Our long-term vision is to have that number somewhere around 75, with another 70 part-time people working shifts. So, and you think, oh, that's 140, 150 people. Yeah, well, we used to be authorized for 175, and our top number was 160 at one time. We lost that. Shortly, the last time we were at 150 personnel was 2002, and we were actually enjoying a post 9/11 bump in dedication and willingness to serve. And then 2008, 2009 came, the big downturn, and we just never really recovered our numbers since then. Been a real struggle. So part of that journey, like Jamie talked about, was our facilities. So if you go to Station 1 or Station 6 or Station 5 right now, their facilities aren't quite as nice as this. They're in those older stations, and we needed a place to put people so they could sleep or rest in between calls in stations that didn't have any accommodations. So what we put in those stations was what we call pod. It looks like a little Connex box or a fish house, and they actually sit out on the apparatus floor, and we've got heaters in them and air conditioners in them and electricity piped to them and station alerting piped into the boxes. So we staff 3 people in those stations, and then Station 4 and Station 3, our newest built stations, we've actually built living accommodations so we can get 24-hour occupancy in those stations. So we're gradually working our way out of what I'd like to call a bit of a hole that we got into. And like most businesses, like most governmental agencies, like most people, sometimes you end up figuring out you're in a hole because you don't experience as much sunlight as you used to, right? You happen to be looking up and you figure out you got a long ways to go to get back out again. That's kind of where we were at with our staffing. So much so that I spent a considerable amount of time with statistics and trying to educate the public and the council that we were really struggling. Every time somebody called, we showed up, but we weren't showing up the way we were supposed to. We weren't showing up as strong as we were supposed to. So we were showing up with 1 or 2 people on a fire truck rather than 4. We were showing up sometimes with fire. Not all the fire trucks we were supposed to show up for a fire, so as a result of that, the council and most of our citizens have decided that, and with my urging, have decided that we needed to change our model, and that's what we've done, changing our model. We're hiring full-time folks and maintaining some part-time staff. So this station is a result of a design that was pretty much governed by 2 of my chiefs, my Assistant Chief Jay Forrester and a Deputy Chief Tim Barrett, and they worked really hard with architects and the construction management people to build this station. They took the lessons they learned when they built this station and applied them to Station 4, which is the newest station over on 84th Street between France and Normandale. Some of the things I'll tell you about as we walk through this station is a direct result in the change of our living environment. Sometime when you really have some time and you really don't mind being scared, I'll talk to you about your living environment and how your living environment has changed, all right? And how when my grandmother furnished a house, it was built with natural materials, jute carpets and cotton batting in the couch and cotton coverings on the couch. Now, what is most stuff made out of? Plastic. Petroleum products. Right, right. So there's a huge difference in heat release rate when those natural fibers burn and plastic burns. There's a huge difference in the fire environment, so where it took 30 minutes for a room to reach flash over, 40 years ago, and it takes 3 minutes for it to reach flash over now. Now when your smoke detector goes off, you will, I won't say you'll be lucky. You're smart for having a working smoke detector. You might be lucky to get out of your house. Okay? And that's for able-bodied people. So who suffers most in fires across the country? Elderly and the children. That's right. You read about fatalities. Most of them are elderly or children. Sometimes you get other folks that have otherwise been impaired or have gone back in to either save something, which is ridiculous, or someone, which isn't ridiculous, right? Saving stuff always mystifies me. But you got to understand, I've got a long time where I've gone to a lot of people's homes and a lot of buildings where their stuff has been reduced to ash. And we were very happy that they were alive and they were crushed because they lost their stuff. So to build a little bit more on that change in fire environment has really affected the fire service as well. All right, so in the last 10 years, they've really come to the realization that the incidence of cancer in the firefighters across the nation is about 10 times what happens in the normal population. All right, and there's a number of reasons for that. Some of it is because we weren't behaving quite the way we should have been. We were behaving like it was 1976. And some of it is because of those products that are burning are much more toxic and have a much longer half-life in your body once you absorb them. So with that being said, several things that we did in this station and the new station try to address that concern. So we have what we call a clean side and a dirty side, and the dirty side is on the other side of those doors on the outside of the hallway, and I'll take you to the dirty side. It's not really dirty. But we call it that because when we come back from a fire, we try to keep everything resulting from the fire on that side and everything on the living side clean from that. So you'll see laundry facilities, not only for our turnout gear, the stuff we wear into a fire, but also for the clothes we wear under the turnout gear, because we don't want those clothes to go back to somebody's house and contaminate their laundries at their homes. We also want them to be completely clean when they come to this side and actually eat and sleep and do those kinds of things. You'll also see exhaust extraction systems for the trucks that act, now when we start the truck up, the exhaust extractor actually comes on automatically and pulls the diesel exhaust out of the building. So a lot of those things that we've built into these new stations is a direct result of the changes in our environment, our work environment. By the way, I forgot to tell you this in the beginning. If you got questions, just ask. You don't have to raise your hand. You can shout it out. You guys got to remember, I've been used to working with firefighters for a very long time, so there's very little that you can say to me or call me that's going to be new. With that, one thing I'd like to do, if you're willing, is to walk through the station, actually show you the facilities. It is very nice. I will be the first to tell you it's very nice. Didn't have to raise your hand, by the way.
So, I don't know if you can see me back here. So like 700 calls 50 years ago, almost 8,000 last year. Talk about the response model and how it's changed, because we don't have 8,000 fires a year.
That's correct. And we didn't have 700 fires a year back then, right? So our calls are a wide variety of calls. It's not just, well, they call us a fire department, and that's traditional in most places. We do a lot more than just go to fires. Excellent point. So we cut people out of crashed cars. We save lost people from the river bottoms. We save all people from all manner of what I like to call stupid human tricks. They've learned to do something and they try it and they fail and then they call for help. And sometimes they're amusing and sometimes they're dangerous and scary. But that's what happens. They call 911. And they give 911 the problem, and most of the time, if nobody else can deal with the problem, they send the fire department. To point, right? I mean, we go to fires, we put out fires, we go to car crashes, we go to heart attacks, we go and do just about everything up until even to the point where they call up and say, the pipe broke under my kitchen sink and I don't know how to turn the water off. And they send us out, and we turn the water off for them. I mean, we've done all kinds of things. Just about anything you can imagine, we get called for and we take care of. Yes, we get called for cats in trees. And yes, every once in a while we go get the cats out of the tree. Because what happens when you don't? Yeah, a human goes up there, and then I'm rescuing not only a cat but a human. You got a question?
I was just kind of curious. I know it seems like home fires always happen in the winter. I'm sure it's not a seasonal factor, but what would you say are the two questions, most common cause of in-home fires, and then are you getting very many calls on carbon monoxide?
Yes, we get a lot of calls on carbon monoxide. I'll take the easy answer first. We get a lot of calls on those, both of people that feel ill and both of people that don't feel ill and their detector's just going off. And we get there and we look at their detector and it was manufactured in 1980. Yeah, time for a new one. Every 5 to 7 years you should put in a new carbon monoxide detector, and people put them in and forget them. Got too wrapped up around carbon. Oh yeah, cause of fire. Probably the most common cause of fire for us today is cooking. Cooking. Both attended and unattended. Both attended and unattended. Used to be a much higher incidence of smokers' carelessness, disposal, careless smoking. That is not as prevalent today as certainly as cooking fires are. Back there first. And then I'll make
yeah, I just wanted to, our fire Easter Sunday afternoon 2002, we think was caused by one of those stray socks. You always end up without the matching pair of one and worked its way behind the dryer. But I just wanted to both commend you guys how quick you came, and also the little book that you give everybody afterwards that says, here's a hotel in Bloomington, they'll put you up first night. here's how you select a contractor. Those are really helpful. But one thing we didn't have, you might want to share with our members with younger families, is a home evacuation plan. I suspect that's a pretty important thing. I wish we had had one.
It is, and if you had young kids, they would have brought one home and pestered you about it, because that's part of our fire education program in the schools. We have found throughout our time in the fire service that kids listen to us, adults don't. So we try to inoculate the kids and send them home and say, hey, we're supposed to do this fire inspection. Hey, we're supposed to have this plan put together. They used to call it Operation Edith, exit drills in the home. And you would have a gathering place outside the home where the whole family was supposed to gather. And you'd actually drill. You'd actually train to where a smoke detector go off, and what would you do? All right? And we actually did, in conjunction with Channel 4 a number of years ago, we actually did a little study to show people what happened, what their kids actually did when the smoke detectors went off. And you would be shocked and saddened to understand that most kids don't do anything. So it's important to do that training. It's important to let them learn how to behave in a fire, crawl low in smoke, where to go out. If there's heat and smoke at the door, don't open the door, leave the door shut. All those things are important to train them, because they don't just automatically know what to do. And so in that particular instance, we had video showing kids when the smoke detectors or smoke alarms went off, not doing anything, either staying in bed or in some cases not even waking up. Now, I had some teenage kids at one time. They're no longer teenagers. In fact, their kids are teenagers, and I know how hard it is to wake them up, right? So you'd need a steamboat klaxon in the room with them to get them to wake up. But the point being is that unless you practice the drill, you practice the effort of how am I going to get out of this when I can't, it doesn't come naturally. Now, just to share with you how much I believe in that, I subjected my fellow executive management team members to an exercise that I've been accused of scarring some of them for, where it was my turn to come up with something to do. One thing I notice in most people is that they don't know how to get out of the building they came in except the way they came. So I'd be willing to bet most of you really don't know where to go except the way you came in, right? And if you can't get out the way you came in, where are you going to go? Yeah. So my point being is, when you go into a building, all right, besides your own house, you should have more than one way out, all right? So to try my test, I had blindfolds for the entire senior staff, all right? Well, I actually took pity on you, right? Because there were some, I wanted to blindfold them all and let them wander around the fourth floor of the building over there. Yeah, your Mall of America location. And because somebody talked to me about that and said that probably wasn't a good idea, I pulled one person, we split into teams, and I pulled one person from each team that was sighted, that was able to give them some clues, all right, and talk to them. But finding the stairwell or not being able to get to that stairwell, whereas the other stairwell, when you can't see, all right, when you literally cannot tell where you are going, becomes very important. So next time you rent a hotel room and you go into the hotel, you should be counting how many doors away from the exit that your room is, so you can count those doors going down, and you should find an alternate path out if you possibly can. Next time you sit down in your airplane, you should count how many rows it is to get to the exit row, all right? The planned exit rows, not the new ones that Boeing plugs in for us. So my point being is that being self-aware, not just at home, but everywhere you're at, is really important. And it's not just because of fire either, although we've had some excellent tragic examples of people only exiting out of the path they came through. The nightclub fire in Rhode Island, where they recovered about 90 90 bodies out of the front entryway because all the other exits, they didn't know they were there. They didn't try to go out them. They didn't look for them when they went in. Human nature is to retreat the same way you came in unless you have a plan, unless you've paid attention and know which way to get out. All right, so that's my gloom and doom story. And by the way, all the executive staff recovered.
Chief, are the firefighters responsible for the maintenance of the fire equipment here, or do you have supporting staff that has that responsibility?
So my fire maintenance for most of any significant maintenance happens, I've got that contracted out. I've got a contractor that comes and does it. They do some basic maintenance. They make sure there's air in the tires, there's oil in the engine. There's a lot of things they maintain besides the truck, though, that take a fair amount of time every day. Do they have air in their self-contained breathing apparatus? Are their hose loads correct? Is all the medical equipment correct? Do they have unexpired drugs on board? One of the new parts of our program that we have started this last year was we started running paramedic engines, where one of the firefighters on the engine is a paramedic. So we actually have drugs on board on the engine that we can provide for certain medical situations. We have devices, Lucas machines, and cardiac monitors and cardiac defibrillators. We got all that stuff on the rig that we can provide medical assistance to people. And the reason we started that was because one of the things, I don't know if anybody's had an opportunity to utilize emergency medical services recently, but ambulances sometimes can take a long time to get to you. And that's because the system is under a lot of stress. It's not the fault of the ambulance company. It's not the fault of any of the ambulance companies, is that they're all under a lot of stress and they are running the wheels off their ambulances. We've actually built bay space into our stations to park ambulances for our partner, Allina Health. They're very rarely parked there. They're usually out doing runs. So when we had this gap between the time the ambulance would get there and us standing around, we wanted to increase the level of care we could provide to people that needed medical help. So we've got a number of paramedics. We're hiring some more paramedics, and they're also firefighters. And we provide kind of a stopgap measure between the time you call 911 and we show up and the time the ambulance can actually get there and transport you. In best case scenario, we have everything ready and we can just load you up in the ambulance and turn you over to the paramedics and they take you right to the hospital. So we're trying to shorten down that on-scene time, shorten down the amount of time those ambulances are out of service so we keep more ambulances in service, shorten that response. It's kind of we're trying to build some synergy there. So questions? There was more, I'm sure.
You mentioned the Mall of America. I'm assuming the Bloomington Fire Department isn't the only one that would respond at the Mall of America. How is that serviced?
The Bloomington Fire Department is the primary responder for the Mall of America. So the only way somebody else is coming is we call them. Does that worry you? So I will tell you. So I will tell you that there's an advantage that we build into our built environment in newer buildings, which you can see in the ceiling here. Sprinklers, fire sprinklers. As long as they're operating correctly, most fires don't exceed one sprinkler head. One sprinkler head will control the fire till we can get there and put it out. Most fires. I have been to several fires where the fire has just about run away from the sprinkler system because the contents that were put under those sprinklers was not what they were designed for. And you can overwhelm a sprinkler system by putting the wrong or having the wrong contents in for the way the system was designed. The times that I've had problems with sprinkler systems not performing has been because of that. One example is our Target store over on off of Penn and American. We had a significant fire there, kicked 29 sprinkler heads, lost part of the roof. And I'll tell you why. Why would you think, what do you think they could store back there that would create such a fire? Well, everything's flammable. Hangers. The plastic clothes hangers from all the racks in the store. And they had racks and racks of them back there. That's where the fire started, and that's what took off. And those hangers, plastic, is just like solid gasoline. And it ran away from the sprinkler system. So we did put the fire out. We didn't lose the building, but
You mentioned plastics being one of the bigger problems. How do you deplasticize your home, so to speak, or make it less?
I'm afraid that ship has sailed. Most of the stuff you see in this room either has plastic part of it or is all plastic. Many of the clothes you wear, unless you happen to be wearing all cotton clothes, polyester blends, anything like that has plastic in it. Okay? Unfortunately, plastic has become so ubiquitous in our environment that it actually exists in very small particles in the water you drink. They make a big deal about it being in the water bottle. It ain't coming from the plastic in the bottle that the water's in. It's coming from the water they put in the bottle, right? You've all seen the stuff about the oceans and the plastic in the oceans. Plastic is so ubiquitous in our environment right now that it's everywhere. So you would have a hard time furnishing your home or supplying it with all the things you need without having plastic there.
I have two questions, if I can ask two again. The cause of death, is it usually smoke inhalation in the fires?
It is common for smoke inhalation or carbon monoxide poisoning, so there's two very toxic things to smoke. One is carbon monoxide. The other one is hydrogen cyanide. Most fire victims that die of smoke, what they call smoke inhalation, die of carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide poisoning. So carbon monoxide, little school here for you, in case you don't know this, binds to the red blood cells in your bloodstream about 100 times easier than oxygen does. So when we pull somebody out of a fire, we've got these machines, we can check on them. If they've got a high level of carbon monoxide in their system, they actually get shipped down to Hennepin County and put in a hyperbaric chamber. Once they're in the hyperbaric chamber, that actually forces oxygen into your bloodstream at a higher partial pressure, trying to get rid of the carbon monoxide, okay, that's in your. The other piece to this little toxic duo is hydrogen cyanide. That is toxic in itself, all right? And so they'll also treat you for cyanide poisoning when you go down for smoke inhalation. So it's kind of a number of things that we didn't think about back then or we didn't know about back then that has become more prevalent, especially with the amount of toxics that are being released.
My second question was about personal safety, and a neighbor of mine was an EMT, and she finally quit because the people were so subject to abusing her and spitting on her and biting her, and I don't even know all the horrible things, but she was just getting so traumatized, she said, I can't do this job. And I know there's been cases where firefighters have been assaulted, attacked, and so on. I was just wondering if you run into much of that.
I've run into it personally a few times. I call those folks my unhappy customers. Most of the time, there's a reason for it. It's not just because they're trying to be mean. They may be under the influence of something. They may be post-seizure behaviors that can be violent. Part of what we train our people to do is be able to size a situation up and make decisions on what's best, not only for the patient, but for our crews in there as well. And we work very closely with the police department. I mean, most scenes we're at, we'll have police department there with us as well. So it was never something that worried me enough to where, or bothered me enough to where I'd quit. But Jamie will probably tell you that I'm a little twisted. So if you want to take a walk with me, we can walk through the station and I'll show you a little bit about what we're talking about.